everybody! I am NicoD. So 2 weeks ago I've gotten a PineBook Pro from Igor and Werner from Armbian. So now 2 weeks later I can tell you about it, and it is mostly very good. So the hardware at first, it is very good, so I like the display. So it is 13-inch and it is a 1080p IPS display, so that is more than sufficient. So it is a very big display, so 1080p is a lot of dots per inch for this. So this is great to watch movies and so I like the display a lot. The keyboard is also very good. I like how it clicks and I like how it types. It is even good for gaming. I have been playing a lot of UT, Unreal Tournaments and Doom and so on this keyboard, and it does very well for that. So that's very good. So the hardware from the PineBook Pro is very good. The only disadvantage on the hardware side is the battery. It is only 10,000 milliamp hour, and for something like this that isn't so much, but it does last for a few hours. So it lasts between 2 hours and 4 hours. So 2 hours when you are using an NVMe on it, and 4 hours when you are not using an NVMe. So an NVMe can use up to 7 watts. So that means it can use 1 amp at 5 volts. Then a display at 1 amp again is already 2 amps, and then you still have to power the sock. So again an amp at least. It can also consume up to 2 amps. So that is almost 5 amps. So that is a lot for a 10,000 milliamp hour battery. So it is always running on the battery. Even when it is plugged in, it is running on the battery. But when the battery is at above 90%, it cannot charge that highly. So when it is in the middle, around 50%, it can charge at 2.5 amps. But when it is higher at 90%, it can only charge at 1 amp or 1.5 amps. So that means it will deplete while using it. So certainly when you're using an NVMe, it will use 2.5 amps, maybe 3 amps, and then it will deplete even while it is plugged in. My first days with using it, I was doing benchmarks and suddenly it fell out and I thought I had broken it. But then I found out that the battery had depleted and I just had to charge the battery a little bit before turning it on. So after a week I took out the NVMe drive, and then it works a lot better, so it doesn't consume as much. An eMMC is made for low power consumption, so with the eMMC it works a lot better. You don't have the fast transfer speeds of an NVMe with an eMMC, but it is still good enough. Even the SD card reader on here is very good, so I can get up to 70 megabytes per second. So I am using, of course, these SanDisk Extreme or even SanDisk Extreme Pro over here. So these work very well with this. So that's all about the hardware. So also the trackpad is pretty good. I have no complaints about the hardware. It keeps itself cool enough, but I'm gonna show you more information. So here we go! So let's start with the specs. So the sock is the Rockchip RK3399. So this is an ARM sock. This is not x86 like other laptops. So this is the same sock as the NanoPi M4 version 2, or the RockPi 4, or the Rock Pro 64. So this has got 4 cores A53 at 1.4 GHz and 2 cores A72 at 1.8 GHz. So the GPU is a Mali T860 MP4. So it has got 4 GB LPDDR4. The display is a 1080p IPS panel. So for storage it has got the SD card slots, the eMMC sockets, NVMe, and it also has got SPI flash. So it has got one USB Type-C port, one USB 3.0 Type A and one USB 2.0 Type A. The battery is a 10,000 mAh lithium polymer battery. So it has got stereo speakers. They don't work that great, but it is sufficient. It also has got a headphone jack, but the headphone jack can also be used as a UART debug port. Then it has got 2.4 GHz and 5 GHz Wi-Fi and Bluetooth 5.0. It has got a front-facing 1080p camera. So it is powered with either a barrel jack at 5 volts or the USB Type-C at 5 volts. Not both together. And then the privacy. So this is something special about this laptop. So you can switch out the camera, the microphone and Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. So you can do that with key combinations and then it turns it out in hardware. So that is something good to have. Just like with any other ARM SBC, it all comes down to the software that is available for the board. And for the PineBook Pro we are in luck because it has got the RK3399 and a lot of work has been done for the RK3399. So I tried a lot of different Armbian images on the PineBook Pro, so Buster or Hirsute or Focal, and I also tried a few different desktop environments on it, Mate, Cinnamon and of course XFCE4. I don't like the GNOME desktop, I didn't like the Cinnamon desktop, I do like the Mate desktop, but there was one problem with it. That was that the battery applet for the taskbar didn't work as it should. With XFCE4 it all works as it should, so I stayed with XFCE4. So here we are in my favorite operating system for the PineBook Pro. So Armbian Focal mainline with the XFCE4 desktop. Here the battery app is standard on the desktop, so here you can change the brightness. Certainly when you are running it on the battery alone, it can help to lower the brightness so the battery can last a little bit longer. To download Armbian we go to the Armbian website, there we go to download, then we go down to PineBook Pro. And here we first have got Armbian Focal XFCE4 with mainline kernel and Armbian Focal XFCE4 with the legacy kernel. The legacy images do not work, so 4.4 kernel do not work, only mainline kernel images work. So if we go more down, then here we have got a lot more images that we can download. So the first one is Buster with XFCE desktop, kernel 5.10. So the second one is 4.4, so this one doesn't work. So then we have got Focal GNOME and Focal XFCE. But under that we have got some test images, so test builds, these are more recent. So here we have got all the desktops that we want, so Budgie, Cinnamon, Deepin, GNOME, Mate, XFCE. Then we have got Hirsute images. So the one I'm using is a Focal XFCE desktop 5.10. On the advice of one of my viewers, I bought a USB Type-C to HDMI cable. So with this you can do dual display, or you can mirror the display from the laptop and then turn the brightness down so it doesn't consume so much. So this works great, but at times my laptop isn't charging anymore when I'm doing this. I don't know why, sometimes it is charging but then it stops. So I'm still using my NanoPi M4 with the RK3399 as main desktop. Instead of this, if it would always be charging with the HDMI adapter, then I would use it as my main desktop too. And now my Firefox doesn't play video well anymore. It's all scrambled, messed up. So there's nothing to do about that. Yeah. So that's the volume. I have updated it. I have now installed Vivaldi, but it doesn't play video as well as Firefox. So the sound is good enough of the PineBook Pro. It isn't very loud, but it is loud enough to hear it well. So good for me for on my trips. But what I was saying in that video about the Kadas Vim 3 isn't true here. So here Firefox is playing very well. For me the video playback in a browser is very important. I am addicted to YouTube. But there is a fix for it, so we can install Vivaldi. With Vivaldi browser the video playback is perfect. So it uses the GPU for the video playback. It still uses the CPU for decoding, but the video playback is a lot better. It doesn't look great here because of my capture device, but it plays really perfect. With Firefox it is near perfect, but with fast moving images you see some streaks in the middle of the display, and I really don't like that. So to install Vivaldi browser it is really simple. So we go to Google and we search for Vivaldi snapshot. Here it is. and here we download the dep package for ARM64. Then we open a terminal. So first we need to install one thing, so font liberation, so this is a dependency for Vivaldi, and after that we can install Vivaldi. So we go to the downloads directory, and here we do sudo dpkg-i for install, and then the name of the package, so Vivaldi, and then you press enter and it is installed. I already have it installed here. So we've got browsing covered. A good browser is very important for me. Another thing that is important for me is being able to watch movies. For that we can use NicoD. So to install it, it is just sudo apt install NicoD. And that can play 1080p movies perfect, but it doesn't do 4K videos. So software wise it is very good. It also has got the Panfrost GPU drivers, so it is also great for gaming. I will show that in another video. So now the transfer speeds. So the SD card with the SanDisk Extreme, it did 68.8 megabytes per second read and 58.2 megabytes per second write. So that is pretty good. The access time is 0.42 milliseconds. That is pretty bad. So the eMMC does 187 megabytes per second. So that was a 64 gigabyte eMMC. And the access time is 0.23 milliseconds. So that is twice as fast as the SD card. This is important for small files. And the write speed is 145 megabytes per second for the eMMC. Then the NVMe of 256 gigabytes did 802 megabytes per second read and 0.03 milliseconds access time. So the access time for an NVMe is really great. This is almost the same speed as RAM, so DDR3 RAM. And then the write speed was 423 megabytes per second. It started at 800, but then it went down to 200. I don't know why. So the SSD over USB 3 reads did 406 megabytes per second. So again, very good. So this maxes out the USB 3 port. And the access time is 0.21 milliseconds. So that's not that good for an SSD. And the write speed was 244 megabytes per second. Again, it started at 400 megabytes and then it went down to 100 megabytes per second. And then the SSD over USB 2 did 35 megabytes per second read and 33 megabytes per second write. And then the temperatures. So this is very good. It doesn't throttle at the default clock speeds. So the idle with the NVMe is 45 degrees Celsius and maxed out with the NVMe is 75 degrees Celsius on the desk. And then I tried with raising it from the desk so that it isn't touching the desk, but it was worse because the heat couldn't dissipate into anything. So then it was 80 degrees Celsius. But then I also tried it without the NVMe and it was a little bit lower, so 41 degrees Celsius in idle, and maxed out it went to 71 degrees Celsius, so the NVMe also hires the temperature of the CPU. And then at 2 GHz, this was with the NVMe, so 47 degrees Celsius at idle, and maxed out it went over 85 degrees Celsius, so it was throttling then. This was with the NVMe, so it could be a little bit lower without the NVMe, but I wouldn't use it much at 2 GHz. And then as last some benchmarks, so they don't say that much. Of course it is faster when it is overclocked, but it isn't that much faster, and it isn't worth it because it uses a lot more of the battery, and it is also a lot hotter. It even throttles, so overclocking I wouldn't do with this. Of course the Odroid N2 Plus is a lot faster. The Odroid N2 Plus is the only SoC that can compete with this, with the RK3399. It would have been better in a laptop, since the Odroid N2 Plus consumes less than the RK3399 while it is more performant. but the software support for the RK3399 is better. So my conclusion is, it is really an awesome laptop. If you are used using ARM, then this can be for you, but if you are not used using ARM, then I would not recommend buying this. For me it is really perfect, it doesn't consume that much. On my cycling trips I always take my SBCs with me, with my display. Now I just need to take this laptop with me and it saves me a lot of space. So I'm very happy with it. I can power it with my power banks. The RK3399 always was my favorite sock, so this is perfect for me. I am very grateful to Igor and Werner for giving me this. So that's it for today. I hope you all liked my video. Thank you all for watching. See you all later. Bye. And don't forget to visit the swag.armbian.com store.